Bing bong.
This is the iDanSimpson Show.
We do it because it's right.
I love the dialectic.
His testicles became swollen.
Based.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come. Please clap.
Who's this man? This man in the hat. I'm gonna ruin this.
You're a stupid baby down, not me.
All right. That's the first time I got to use that button. It starts the whole show and starts recording and everything. Matthew J. Hunter, how you doing today?
I'm good, Dan. How are you doing?
It's been a while. It's been a while. Yes, it has. I'm sorry. I don't know why that song stuck in my head. Matthew J. Hunter, can you please confirm your pronouns if you like?
He, him. Those are fine.
Excellent. All right. And where do you think would be a great spot for us to put like your information in the lower thirds? What would be like a good link? Would you like your Twitter link there?
Yeah, Twitter link's fine. That's fine.
Awesome. All right. And that's Matt Hunter, MCR at Twitter. All right. Now let me just put that in there and I'll try to take a deep breath so we can get going here. All right. Excellent. Hey, stoked to be with you today, and I really appreciate that. There we go. I like how that looks. And hey, I really appreciate you joining me. What we want to do here, I think a lot of my audience doesn't quite know you yet, so we can go ahead and lean into that a little bit, and then just let the conversation go where it wants. Matthew, you are, I don't think it's fair to call you a returning champion to this show, but you joined me and Kenzo Shibata on Kenzo's show, Meet the Left, and I think you were one of our first guests, so really glad to be with you today. You know, what's up? How's your day going? Tell us like what's happening in your life.
It's going good.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm here right now with you, and I greatly appreciate it.
Right.
I have another podcast I'm producing for. It's going to be a crime series on boxing later today, so that's going to be fun to do.
A crime series on boxing.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Like crime in and outside of the ring.
Yes.
Oh.
My day job, especially for the last like 7 years or so, has predominantly been media inside boxing, reporting, doing journalism work, and then obviously branched out to MMA as well. Then I started doing actual work in promotion as a general manager. So that's sort of the day job, so to speak. And obviously in the last, 6-7 years, we have one of the most radicalizing times in U.S. history. So as well, I, fellow Bernie supporter back in 2016, 2015, progressed in my radicalization in the last, 6 years. And now a CPUSA member, a member of the Southeast LA Club. Also, I believe I'm still a member of DSA Los Angeles, though I have not checked if I paid my dues recently.
Yeah. I had a similar thing with my Chicago thing. Go on.
Yeah. And I've just been trying to branch out into, because I've worked in media and boxing. I tried to political media as well. I have a YouTube channel called Trending Now Network, which I have a podcast and a documentary series I'm producing.
I'll link that in chat. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The podcast is General Strike Podcast, and the documentary series, The History of Socialism, which is also...
Oops. Autoplay. Sorry, YouTube, autoplay from your channel. This is your channel here. No, it is what it is. That's my bad. I was making sure we got the good link. And subscribe. Everyone hit subscribe and hit the bell. You know what I mean? That's a good thing. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the documentary series is kind of my way of doing something that I love. I always love video editing and sort of video production, stuff like that. As I write my book, I'm writing a book on the history of socialism. So each draft of like a chapter I kind of do is a documentary episode. That's kind of the gist of what I've been doing. Kind of going all over the place too. Like the first chapter I kind of wrote and did was about Rosa Luxemburg and the SPD and all that. And I went back in time to like proto-socialists and proto-anarchists from, China and Persia and stuff like that. the last one I did was on, the revolutionary time period of, the 18th and early 19th century, the American, English, French, and Haitian Revolution. So I recommend people checking that stuff out, especially the Haitian Revolution video, because it's definitely one that in the U.S. Western left is a topic that doesn't get discussed enough. But yeah, I've been working on that as I've been trying to increase my activity in terms of organization at the grassroots level. I was recently involved in the local Union 37 bakery workers strike down in John Denaire, down in Santa Fe Springs, LA. Cool. And they just won a massive win in their strike. The strike was going on for like 120 days.
Really?
Like a $4 raise. So, big win there for largely Latina women, immigrant women, and largely women that are older too. They're, 30s, 40s, 50s. Some of them 60s working, 8, 12-hour shifts. It's insane.
So is it okay if we celebrate that one? Can we put a W in chat? Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah. People's World.
People's World.
People's World put out a couple articles about that. So if you wanted to understand more about local Union 37 and its class struggle, so to speak, to get better working conditions, People's World has a ton of good articles about that.
We have a question in chat where you train, but we don't embarrass me, chat. Let Matthew talk about the important things. Jeez.
Man, I've trained in a lot of gyms, anywhere from Jack Rabbits to The Rock with Manny Robles' team with Michael Collin, Oscar Valdez. Boxing fans know that. I don't know if you know that, Dan. That's fine.
I'll just do this.
What else? Hill Street Club in Long Beach. That's been the one I've been at a lot of times. And obviously I go mostly to gyms nowadays to record. So I'm not really training, unfortunately. I'm filming fighters and making promos for them. But that's basically the gist of what I've been doing for the last 7 years is that, have a day job in media, in sports media specifically, and then obviously been branching out and radicalizing in terms of my political activity.
All right. Tell us about, I want to lean into, if you don't mind, if we can elaborate on this, and then of course let the conversation go where it likes, and I want to let you know you're welcome to tell us about any and all projects that you're working on. Well, we can have maybe more time here, or even at the very end. You can talk about anything you want to talk about. You're welcome to monologue about anything you want to monologue about, even if it's like something if it's like a disagreement with me. I'm here to listen and just gain a better perspective of the world and other people's perspectives. Anyways, so that's sort of a gist about what's going on here. Tell us more about, maybe if you don't mind, a minute or so, or however long you like. I don't care. Tell us about that radicalization, because I feel I've had something similar happen to me in the past, maybe, 2 years, which is specifically when I was probably when we started, when we met, and I was, I think, heading down my, like a new ideological journey, heading down a new pathway, left, and I would have to literally figure out what left actually meant, and I would have redefined it in my head, and then I defined it as capitalism versus socialism-based communism, etc. I still I'm having a mind-expanding experience where, right now, obviously, I'm learning about like Ukraine and Russia, like a lot of people. I had no fucking idea what was going on as of about 4 weeks ago, and I just was like, all right, I'll do the homework. I'll try to figure out the geopolitical landscape here, and this has been a really good lesson for me in that respect too. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that, like, I've had an ideological journey. You've mentioned sort of being radicalized. I sort of feel similarly. You've been doing it for 6 years. I've been doing it for 2. What were maybe some of the biggest things that were catalysts for you on that journey? What started pushing you down? What were the biggest things that were like, all right, or maybe big realizations along the way? Anything that you want to mention that you thought were important or interesting or relatable along the way?
I want to add some context or some foundation to that radicalization period, because obviously, like anything, it doesn't happen all of a sudden, and men's consciousness has changed. Like the material conditions have changed a lot in my lifetime. I grew up in a very Republican conservative household where like Fox News was the channel to watch in terms of news gathering, news information. And I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school, and really had a lot of reactionary viewpoints because I was 15 and all I was watching, because my parents were watching it, were Fox News. And I had a teacher from Canada. Shout out to Mrs. Coors. She was awesome. She had us read the Communist Manifesto in AP European History. And I went to a charter private Christian school. So this was even more mind-blowing and also not normal for that school. This was very much an abnormal thing. And I remember being almost immediately infatuated with the text, if that makes sense. Like I found it so galvanizing, so revolutionary. Yeah. But yet it would take me probably another 5 years or so, maybe 6 years or so from that point to really understand it. And I remember being in she didn't get canned. No, she didn't get canned. Thank God. At least she could still be there. She could not be. I don't know. When I left high school, she was still there. Shout out to Mrs. Coors. But I remember being in college too and taking like a political philosophy course, and we were reading everything from Thomas Hobbes to Aquinas to Marx a little bit, Ayn Rand. It was a wide spectrum for a political philosophy course. And I started reading Marx again, and this was 5 years, 6 years after I had read it, had not read it in the meantime. Because I remember just thinking like the manifesto is about revolution. I really didn't understand the class concepts behind it. It was just revolution, and American Revolution. All these like things are really ingrained in the American psyche and Americano, and I found it really striking. And obviously, that was 2014, 2015. So this is the rise of Trump. This is a huge thing. Also, in that time span, you have the fallout of the recession in 2008. From 2011 and Occupy onwards. That's me in sophomore year of high school. It was 2011. Was Occupy. My parents went through a big financial crisis, lost their jobs, etc. And, that sort of recontextualizing where my class standing was, personalized it, to be honest. And very much the way of like a conservative parent having a child that comes out as gay or whatever, then they start, relaxing on some of those social conservative viewpoints. Same way to me, it was a reclassification of my family, of myself. And that was tough. It was very hard to deal with. I came from more of a petite bourgeois background, and then it was very much in a working class family, budgets. It was very difficult. We had to go from house to house. We were like basically couch surfing at one point. It was not fun. And again, this is happening as we're seeing this rise of the Trump era. Bernie is becoming a real national figure in politics at that point. And I definitely started watching more progressive outlets, whether that be, TYT in the beginning, whether that be Majority Report with Michael Brooks, rest in peace. That really started pushing me towards that progressive social democratic position. And then Bernie didn't win. And then he didn't win again. You know what I mean? Like these were big moments of massive class struggle. We had the uprisings of 2020. I mean, these were huge sort of like watermark points for where we were going as a society, where the class struggle is heading. And I just noticed that as I was reading the theory behind it, as I'm watching the material conditions really deteriorate around us as a society, it became clear that like the reformist attitude of social democracy, its limitations are fatal as an ideology. And that's when I really started to expand more towards and I looked into anarchism, I looked into Marxist-Leninism, and obviously I went towards Marxist-Leninism and communism with CPUSA. I remember I tried getting into PSL at one point too, before the 2020 election, and I couldn't get into the party or the organization. And DSA was such a big tent, open tent. It always felt to me that there were too many cooks in the kitchen, or that there was a lack of cohesiveness in the policy of even local chapters of DSA. And LA is a local chapter, but that's a massive chapter compared to other areas. So you get a wide spectrum of politics in DSA. And I just kind of got sick of it, to be honest. And so that's when I looked into PSL, then CPUSA, and I joined CPUSA. I've had a mentor that sort of brought me in, onboarded me into the party. I worked with Cesar Chavez back in the day in the 80s, real veteran of the class struggle. And it's been illuminating, to say the least. And I will always stress this as well. To watch the material conditions around us is a huge factor. But if you don't have the theory behind it, then you will misinterpret the material conditions. But I see a lot of people that are on the left who have not read, mountains of theory, and they misinterpret the material conditions. Ukraine, Russia is another good example of that. When people either have a real, headline understanding of the theory, imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and they go, oh, well, Russia, the U.S., these are both imperialist blocs. And no, you have to actually read the theory to understand what Lenin meant by imperialism and whether or not the material conditions of Russia or the U.S. or whatever fall under that. Just to use an example.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. I wish I've been trying to say that all for like 2 weeks. For like 3 weeks, I've been trying to say that, and I just couldn't get the words out. Yeah. The imperialism thing, the argument, Russia's doing an imperialism. I'm like, that doesn't really help us understand what's happening.
Because that argument boils down to, well, bigger country invading smaller country, therefore that's imperialism. Well, then is Ukraine imperialistic against Donetsk and Luhansk?
Uh-oh. Shit, you went there.
That's like the argument then. It's like, well, if Ukraine's much bigger than those two republics, therefore Ukraine's imperialist in its 7-8 year bombing of those two republics with 15,000 people being killed, 30,000 people being wounded. Like the reactionary base, even within the Western left, is so inconsistent because they don't have the ideological theory that's the foundation of their analysis.
We're talking lib left.
Yes,
U.S. lib left. Cool. Just for clarity, yes.
And even, let's be honest. There's even social democratic elements, progressive elements that fall under that. We see people like AOC others that have in the past agreed with U.S. intervention in places like Haiti, for example. Oh. When Jovenel Moïse was assassinated by, arguably U.S.-backed mercenaries and Colombian, we know for a fact, Colombian ex-military. We had AOC come out here and say, well, if the U.S. has a good plan, then I'm okay with U.S. intervention. That if you have any sort of understanding of the U.S. empire and its material effect on the world, you would be like, no U.S. intervention, never. But you see that common mishap with the Western U.S. left, that their reactionary tendencies give into inconsistencies. Dan, I don't know if you want me to go on or...
I was like just a tiny bit distracted by one thing.
Okay.
Can you say what you just said at the there at the end? I'm really sorry. I was trying to make an sound effect, to illustrate how wrong that the view was that you were illustrating. But then I totally forgot what I was doing because the sound effect fucked up. I hit the wrong button.
It happens. That the inconsistencies of the reactionary base, even within the U.S. left, that leads to inconsistencies because there's a lack of theory that's the foundation of their analysis.
That's what gets them to go, hey, let's support this U.S. puppet state, which is Ukraine, and instead of going, hey, let's support all of the working class people that are involved with this conflict that are getting fucked over because of NATO aggression led primarily by the biggest military power in the history of the world, which is the United States. And of course, we're also giving Nazis guns. No, we're not just saying Nazis like people that we don't like. We're like literal Nazis, not even like neo-Nazis, like sort of far removed. No, there's a direct fucking lineage from Nazism to like a lot of the people that we're talking about. No, not the entire Ukrainian army. Stop typing stupid shit in my chat. Stop it. There's someone in chat that's freaking out right now. I need you to calm down. We're not saying literally the entire Ukraine is full of Nazis. We are saying it's pretty nationalist, and that's a slippery slope, if you know what I'm talking about. However, there are literal Nazis. They love to wear it. You see them in all the pictures. Even NATO's posting pictures. All right. Well, what the fuck? Let's keep going down this rabbit hole here. I'm not sure exactly the kinds of things that you've been getting into. I think we've seen... Okay, how about this? I'll start with this. Today, me and my chat, we've been doing a little Putin deep dive. We've been watching, actually, some Oliver Stone. And I'm realizing I got to watch that 4-hour documentary. I'm probably going to wrap my stream up right after this and invite chat to hang out with me in the Discord as we watch that. If I could find a better version of it than 480p, I'm going to do that. But otherwise, we're going to stick with this random version we found on YouTube. And then we found this I've never seen anything like this. This incredible chat with Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert, where he feels like he's fucking grilling Oliver Stone. He's like, yo, you interviewed him. You really gave him the easy business. You didn't ask the hard questions. And it's just like, shut the fuck up, Stephen Colbert challenge. Like, just, can we do that once, Stephen Colbert, where we shut the fuck up? Because he just brought the lib energy. But here's the thing. I think the interview was 2017 with him. If that were me, I probably would have given him the same energy. I hadn't done the work yet. And I was saying while we were watching it, like, libs, they want to feel moral superiority, but they don't want to do the work in terms of figuring out what's actually fucking going on. All right. That's not a question, but like, let's just let that go where it wants to. Yeah.
And honestly, like, the idea of like moral superiority, I think, is an overblown position to take. Like, it's
geopolitics. It's not about you. You know what I mean? It's not about the way you feel about the world. It's fucking geopolitics. It's not about you. Sorry. Yeah.
And often, like, the idea of like winners and losers, or the good guys and bad guys, like, these are very black and white ways of looking at the world, when that's just not the way it works. Like, Russia is a really good example of it, right? Like, domestically, even though they're not like Ukraine, because Ukraine outlawed the Communist Party, Russia definitely cracks down on leftist organizations, on the Communist Party at times, especially, 10, 20 years ago, that was the case. But when you look internationally, Russia is absolutely a key piece in the anti-imperialist bloc, with China, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran. Like, these countries, whether or not they're all socialist doesn't matter. They are clearly all an anti-imperialist bloc against the Western imperialist core. NATO, the U.S., EU, the IMF, World Bank complex. Like, clearly these institutions, these states are working against that dynamic. That contradiction within the Russian domestic and foreign policy is a contradiction that just exists. Whether you want to wax poetically about it's good or not, or it proves that Russia's bad or not, I really don't think it matters. When you look at Russia, what it does internationally, that has to take into account when you're talking about it domestically. When you're talking about it in regards to foreign relations to its neighbors like Georgia or Ukraine, that's been in the news the last 10 years. And again, it's a messy analysis. It's a messy world. To go Putin bad is simplistic. Yeah. Putin's a capitalist. Like, Putin is absolutely not of the left. But to say that Putin is bad in regards to totality would be incorrect. Because what Putin does and what Russia does as a country, not just Putin, because Putin is painted as this autocrat, which I just don't generally believe. They do that with every world leader that's not in the imperial core or the imperial bloc. And it's never the case. So I generally don't believe that Putin is this autocratic, despotic leader. Like, there is some collective leadership at the top with the United Russian Party. There always is. But their lack of, let's say, ideological purity from a leftist perspective is immaterial when you see Russia and Putin, as a result, go and provide vaccines to the global south. Go provide infrastructure to the global south. not to the degree that China does, but they do that. There's a reason why we see Latin America shifting so drastically towards China and Russia. It's because their loan preferences, their infrastructure programs are definitely, especially in China's case, not as predatory as the West. You know, these economic policies of internationalism that we're seeing from this anti-imperialist bloc has to be applauded. You can applaud it while also saying, hey, Putin is cracking down on protesters too hard. He's jailing too many of them. That's a fine critique. But to then go, Putin is bad, speaks of a totality that does not exist.
All right. I feel like you've called me out, Matthew. In my title, I have Putin bad. But the thing is this, I put it there just to avoid the conversation. You know what I mean? But you're right. You're absolutely right. You know, it's too reductive. It doesn't help understanding. And that's sort of one of the things I'm trying to avoid. But at the same time, you know, fucking, I'm on the internet. Just leave me alone. These fucking trolls. They're like, they like want me to say Putin bad. They feel like that solves something. You know, all the people like posting on Twitter, all the Putin memes, like, you're not owning Putin by doing this. You're not helping, like, nothing's changing by doing this. Okay, I'll say it. Putin bad. Look, nothing's changed.
And the idea, like, I see someone in the chat saying, like if you had to pick one, like, you don't have to pick one.
Yeah.
Because that dichotomy is not real. It's an arbitrary dichotomy that you're creating. And two, it's, again, not based in material conditions, material reality.
Yeah.
Like, I know so many progressives, so many social democrats don't have a good understanding of historical materialism, and that's fine. You have to read a lot of theory to get it. I'm just being honest. Like, it's not something that I can just speak in one sentence and everyone's going to understand it. You're going to have to read Socialism, Utopia, and Scientific. You're going to have to read Dialectical and Historical Materialism by Stalin. You're going to have to read certain texts to understand it. You just have to. But so many leftists don't ground their analysis in material reality. It's always vibes. It's always, how do I feel? Like, this person doesn't feel good. They feel bad, so therefore they're bad. Okay, if you think Putin's bad, how do you square the round hole of him when it comes to the global south? Do you view it as bad as well? Or do you view it as good? Is Putin good there and Putin bad in other places?
Yeah.
Therefore, you already have a false dichotomy that you're creating. So I just think that a lot of leftists, again, especially in the West, when I speak about leftists, I don't talk about leftists in India or China or Africa or Latin America. Like, I speak to the people that I deal with. And so often there is that moral self-righteousness that they want to feel. I think part of that comes from, like, the American exceptionalism that's, like, built into us, that, like, we're the best, so therefore, like, our viewpoint's the best, right? It comes with the individualism of America, that I am just as smart or just as educated or just as well-versed in whatever with everyone. No, maybe you're not. Like, there's definitely a time when I have to sit back and listen to other comrades.
Oh, yeah.
That I don't know enough, that I'm not educated enough, that I haven't had the experience enough. I mean, especially when it comes to organizing. You know, when I talk to comrades that have been in the party for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I mean, some of them have been in the party since the 60s, and I talk to them. Their level of experience, I cannot match. That level of knowledge that they bring, I cannot match. Similar to, again, the theory. If you don't have that theory, then you cannot match it. And it's just how it is. And I wish leftists would relax a little bit about being jingoistic about these geopolitical issues. You don't have to wave Ukrainian flags and say a neo-Nazi slogan, "Glory to Ukraine." You don't have to say that. You don't have to. You can analyze it and even come to the conclusion that maybe Putin is a net negative in the world. Come to that conclusion. You have to prove it. You have to substantiate it. But you still have to come to that conclusion. And again, like you said, a lot of people don't want to put in the work. It's unfortunate. And I will say this. A lot of people think that they are doing the work too. I don't necessarily think that it's a conscious thing of, like, people avoiding the hard work of understanding these things. I think people think they know it. People will read headlines or watch MSNBC or whatever it is for an hour, and then all of a sudden they think they know it. They're knowledgeable. And that is not even the bare minimum of, like, trying to understand a geopolitical situation. Like, watching MSNBC or trying to take information for an hour or read articles for an hour and that's it, it's not enough. It's definitely not enough to understand an entire nation state and its geopolitical dynamics.
All right, let's go down that road. I find this to be fascinating myself because I'm trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? And it's hard to, like I like to say on the channel, sort of navigate the media landscape in order to find like good resources. Excuse me. And of course, I think I'd like to hope one of the big lessons that me and my audience is learning is that like corporate media just cannot be fucking trusted almost anytime. Maybe you might be able to piecemeal some shit together, but the process of doing that is so laborious, and also you could be consuming misinformation and believing that it's like almost not worth it. Like, just don't even listen to it at fucking all. So I've been finding myself like really asking myself like, well, what resources are, better than others? And I don't know, I've been finding myself watching a lot of breakthrough news. I don't know how you feel about that. I'm always open to learning more. There's just very few people like I find that I can sort of trust, and I think I also like to hope the other main lesson that me and my audience is learning here is that you can't trust anybody. You can't even trust yourself. You've got to be especially suspicious of yourself when you are wanting to believe the kinds of claims that are being made that aren't substantiated, as we are skeptical of like people that we sort of like condemn for doing the same thing. And we're all human, so it's like easy to make mistakes. But let's go down that road. Like, how does one figure out what's going on when one lives in the imperial core? In order to figure out what's going on, you have to break through the imperial veil. You know what I mean? It's like this is all they give you. You're like in this little bubble, and in order to figure out what's going on, you have to get outside the bubble. And they make it's by design. It's very hard to get out. I don't know what I just said. Just start talking.
I absolutely agree with it. I absolutely agree with what you said. I think it's extremely hard, and the issue is like Google, which is owned by Alphabet, right?
Yes.
Is a multinational, massive corporation based in the U.S. Like, its algorithms are designed for you not to get information that is contrary to the narratives of corporate media. Like, for example, if you're going to type in anything on Google that you're trying to look up, it's geopolitical, Marxist theory, whatever it is, right?
Big titties. Oh, what? Excuse me.
Most of the time, you're not going to get leftist outlets that are at the top of that search engine. Like, it's never going to happen. So it's difficult. I will say that. You're going to have to do investigation. Like, you're going to have to like almost be a detective to find sources.
Yeah.
To use Russia and Ukraine as an example again, the best way I would describe it is that first you want to analyze what our fellow comrades are saying on the ground, right? Okay. You want to analyze what the Communist Party of Ukraine is saying. You want to analyze what the Communist Party of Russia is saying. You want to analyze what other leftist organizations are saying in the region to start your analysis.
So you're looking for those quote tweets, if you will.
Yes. Right. Or these parties often have websites. They're hard to find. I will say that they're hard to find sometimes, but you can find them. Up until I think last week, the Ukrainian Communist Party, even though it's illegal in the country, had its website up. It's now down now, I believe. But they had tons of comments, tons of statements about the conflict going back 8 years, of course.
Yeah.
It's important to sort of analyze that. There's people on the ground that are on our side of the spectrum politically. It's important to understand what they say because they're the ones dealing with it. And then I would say, for anyone out there trying to decipher information, right? Again, to use Ukraine, Russia, look up information that's on both sides first. Like you're going to want to read RT, which is hard to do now. You're going to want to read Sputnik. You're going to want to read certain outlets that are on the Russian national media side. And then you're going to want to read CNN, MSNBC. I think there's some value to that. And then on top of that, you have to go to outlets that you quote unquote trust, that are either Western, they're not specific to this situation, but they're outlets you trust, whether they be Telesur, whether they be Kawashan News.
Say that one again.
Whether they be
I didn't catch that.
Kawashan News, I believe is how you pronounce that. KAWCH is how you start it. I don't know how to finish the spelling. It's Bolivian, I believe.
Cool.
There's a lot of good people there. Obviously you have places like People's World, which is an affiliate to the CPUSA, though it's not directly tied to CPUSA, I should say, because there's often a lot of contributors that aren't with the party that go to People's World. Even though I don't always agree with them, Jacobin has some really quality articles. The Nation occasionally will have some really good quality articles as well, though when it comes to geopolitical dynamics, whether it's U.S. versus China, you often see places like The Nation sort of capitulate to the narrative of the West. And it's very hard to see. And I think that when you're starting out as a progressive, right, or starting out as a social democrat, like you're just beginning that journey, you often are watching the TYTs, the Majority Reports, you're reading Jacobin, you're reading The Nation, maybe like Mother Jones still, even though that's really not in that group anymore.
I still like Vice News, Matthew. Vice News helps me understand the world. Excuse me.
I watched a Vice News clip about Xi Jinping yesterday. Show about how like he's changing China, and it's rough, man. It's rough. Vice News is decent in the fact that it will cover topics in some depth that like a CNN you won't watch, you won't see it. There's some value to that, but again, the angle of it, the analysis of it is always from the standpoint of corporate media. Still, it just is covering topics a little bit more radical. It's definitely from that like era of Occupy that was like really reactionary. Like Vice is like from that 100%. And it's one of those things where you have to start with your own set of principles and a foundation of theory. Then you go into reading all these news sources. Because if you go in without that foundation, that's when you can get swayed very easily by what you read, by what information you're taking in. And I will always press this as well. As the great Kwame Ture said, read primary sources. People in America do not read primary sources. So when you see an article and they reference or they have hyperlinks to other things, go read those hyperlinks. Go find out where the information is coming from and then trace it back. Like North Korea. Or
it's Adrian Zenz. It's my favorite resource, Matthew. Adrian Zenz. What's wrong with him? Yeah, exactly. You got to go down and figure out what's down there. Otherwise, you'll believe. Otherwise, you'll find yourself believing AP and MSNBC, etc. Yeah.
With one unnamed source as the evidence for what they're stating, that North Korea is banning skinny jeans or whatever.
It's just gene codes. It's gene codes all the way down in North Korea.
It's difficult, but again, you have to have that foundation of analysis, and how you do that is by reading theory. Okay, and how you add to that theory is by going out into the world, your own community, and getting involved. Once you do that, figuring out what's happening in Ukraine and Russia is far easier. I guarantee you. What's happening in Venezuela is going to be far easier for you to understand if you do the work in your own community and in your own head, by learning the theory, by acting on the theory in your own community. You can analyze every situation geopolitically. I guarantee it.
All right. Let me try that, and I got a way to illustrate that. I think I'm imagining myself as a leftist, anti-capitalist. I look at what happened in 2014. I imagine myself in Ukraine as this person, and I could be wrong. I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. I'm trying to practice empathy. I'm trying to practice that kind of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, I watched a 2014 coup. We had Victoria Nuland, fucking Chris Murphy, and of course, we watched John McCain. He's a real maverick, come in and hand out cookies and talk and shake hands with fucking Nazis. I'm like, that guy's a Nazi he shook hands with. The guy that McCain's on stage with is a Nazi, right? And I'm imagining myself as a Ukrainian understanding the nationalism and the Nazism that's arising around me. And then they tell me, okay, there's a war breaking out. Russia's invading, and they say I can't leave. They say I can't leave. I have to fight. I'm 37, so I wouldn't be able to leave. I have to stay and fight. And I'd be like, what the fuck? Am I going to fight with the Nazis? Are you going to stick me in the Nazi battalion? I don't know. Is that an unfair way of practicing empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of someone who's over there? I don't know. Is that unfair?
No, that's perfect. That's perfect to do. Again, Ukraine and Russia is such a great example for so many of these things right now. Because it requires nuance. It's not so much black and white. You know, when it's Cuba versus the U.S., the left can be a little more united in that because Cuba is socialist. We know that. We can defend Cuba to a degree. The idea that like Russia, like we have to like have nuance in this discussion for us in the U.S., like it's impossible because we've always been painted Russia as the baddies. But the reality is like you have to put yourself on the ground. What's the working class doing in any case? You know, we're talking about like France in North Africa, right? And how French troops have been killing people in Burkina Faso, in Niger. Mali just kicked out the French, right? Put yourself in the shoes of somebody that is a peasant, that is a working class person in those countries that has faced decades and decades, generations and generations and generations of untold punishment and destruction. Are you gonna be mad that they're violently going against France right now? No, you wouldn't say that. Similar to if you saw or if you understood the decades and decades of, honestly, war crimes against Jewish people, the Romani people, ethnically Russian in the eastern part of Ukraine, by the fascist ultranationalist element. You know, we've had, and you can read this in mainstream corporate media, you know, they just don't talk about it. But you can find articles talking about how Azov and other fascist battalions went in and committed pogroms against Jewish communities, Romani communities in the last 7 years. That was never really given any blurbs on, you know, primetime CNN. But you can find articles about this. You can research this stuff. You can see videos of it even. Imagine if you're a descendant of somebody that dealt with the Holocaust, like Zelensky is. Why would you see this and be supportive of it? Like, I don't understand it. It's mind-boggling to me, to be quite honest. You know, and the idea, I know you mentioned this earlier. Yeah. Not all Ukrainians are fascists. Not all Ukrainians in the military are fascists. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Absolutely the case. To treat it as a monolith would be inaccurate. However, imagine this.
Sorry, I'm just diving here.
Imagine you have battalions of overt Nazis in the military, and no one in the government is doing anything about it. Nobody in the military is kicking them out. In fact, they're bringing more paramilitaries into the official National Guard of Ukraine. How can you not paint the Ukrainian state as at least friendly to Nazism? Maybe not Naziist as itself, but friendly to Nazism? I think that's a fair statement. And again, if you're a working class peasant or whatever in the eastern part of Ukraine, you're seeing this for 8 years. You have 15,000 people of your friends, family, loved ones that have been killed by bombings that are still going on. Like when people talk about the civilian casualties in Ukraine right now, they're not going to play that video of what we saw in Donetsk yesterday, where bodies were literally blown apart by shelling by the Ukrainian military. Like you just don't see it. And like
no one's talking about that, but you hear all about Snake Island. You hear about that ghost of Kiev. Please. I interrupt.
Dude, I still hope the ghost of Kiev is like semi-real.
It'd be fun.
Like it's like some dude in like a crop duster plane, like just flying around. You know, like something like stupid like that. That's what I hold to it. That's what I hold. But I think your example is absolutely correct. You know, you have to put yourselves in the shoes of the common man, the common woman, the common person in these cases, and have empathy. And it's not hard. It's just not something that we're wired to anymore, especially in the U.S. We're wired to be non-empathetical. We're wired to be greedy. We're wired to be individualistic in every way. So to think collectively, to think empathetically is going against the programming of us in the U.S. That's just the reality. And we have to deprogram ourselves. It's unfortunate.
Deprogramming. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we not only need to deprogram, which is like start to see all the fucking weird ass propaganda that we've been fed and ingested throughout our lives. I love how you're bringing it in theory, and I might actually ask you a question in a minute here, which is something I want to start asking of my guests, which is, hey, given your impression of me, what theory do I need? Because every time someone tells me that, I go, oh, okay, I'll read that book. And then I don't for like 6 months. And then I read it and I'm like, fuck. That was a really good book. People have been, people told me, Lenin's State and Revolution, and I'm like, okay, fine, Lenin. That guy's funny, because he's got the same name as John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and that's funny too. Anyways, and I didn't read it, and actually, to be honest, I've never read it, although I got a great version of it, and it had a really wonderful introduction, which like laid out the concepts for me, and I'm like, that'll do it for me, because I sort of did the same with Marx's Capital. I got the fucking illustrated version. I'm like, I don't have time for this shit, man. Just give me the concepts. I'll try to, swallow it, and we'll go on from there. Okay. With that, okay, well, let's go down that direction. Do you have any like impressions of me where you're like, Dan, you sort of suck at this? I will take it honorably. If there's anything that like you're thinking of, just that if you have any impression of me where you're like, this guy needs a little bit more of this, hit me. Tell me off. I want you to own me. I want you to cuck me right now.
All right, I'll say two. I'll say two.
All right.
First one, and this is for the listeners as well. Another View of Stalin by Ludo Martins.
Let's go here.
Highly recommend this one. Every question you have about Stalin, everything that you've heard about Stalin,
he's not good. They say he's not good, Matt.
Stalin bad.
They say Stalin bad.
They say that. They do.
Okay, you're saying it's complicated. Can we start there? I don't know what that sound is, and I'm sorry that happens. You're saying it's a little more complicated than that.
Absolutely. Okay. Of course it is.
He did a Holodomor. Sorry. If you say it more often, it's harder to argue against, right? Holodomor. Sorry.
That's true. And like, I bet most people that are progressives that say like, oh no, we're not like Stalin's right. We're not Stalinists, right? Like they bring up the Ukrainian famine, and I bet they don't realize that a large part of that was fabricated by the William Randolph Hearst media, which was yellow journalism at the time. And
I watched Deadwood.
I'm
sorry.
What was that?
I watched Deadwood. You said Hearst, right? Was that the same character? Is that literally the same character that you're referencing? Do you watch Deadwood?
No.
I'm sorry to make that a thing. But you're saying like extremely wealthy capitalists
Yes.
painting him to look painting the picture Stalin bad.
Yeah, he had a guy by the pseudonym of, like, I think his name was Thomas Walker, go to Moscow and pretend to be in Ukraine for like a week. And then he came back to the U.S. and wrote all the articles that were about the Holodomor. And then it was published by Harvard University. And then there was the snowball of the lie that was, again, funded by Nazi Germany. It's in this book. It details it all. The purges, you want to know about that. You want to know about Stalin versus Trotsky, whether Stalin portrayed the revolution as Trotsky said. This goes really well into it. It also goes really well into the revolutionary time period before the Soviet Union was formed, talking about Stalin's role in the Bolshevik Party. I thought that was very interesting. For people that have no conception of Stalin, this is a decent start, to be honest.
Let me jump in and say, yes, please.
Oh, no, go. That's fine.
I was just going to say, we got someone in chat that's saying, is he defending Stalin? Just pump the brakes. Here's what I want. Don't embarrass me in front of my guest. What are you doing, chat? Gosh. Anyways, here's the thing. It's fine. I'm just riffing here. I abuse my chat like that sometimes. In the best spirit possible. We're saying it's complicated. We're saying, and I experienced this firsthand when I was watching, I don't know if you know this show. It's called The Culture Club. And that's a YouTube, I'm sorry, it's a Twitch show hosted by Left Hand Stu, and they got great guests, and I found myself for the first time listening to an actual historian. They got the degree, they did the fucking work. I'm grifting off their work so that I can get a very basic understanding of what is sort of leading up to the circumstances that we have no idea what's going on, again, because of the fog of war. But like, what led up to this? Well, let's actually sit the fuck down and listen to actual historians that have talked about this. And like, for me, that was a very humbling moment, which I think is very important for anyone who's talking about geopolitics. And especially if you're like me, you're just getting into it. So with that said, yeah, I remember listening to the Culture Club, listening to a Russian historian, an American Russian historian, talk about how the Holodomor is, maybe not what you would think it is if you read it from Wikipedia. and sort of what we're saying is, hey, history's very fucking complicated, and if you haven't done the work, you probably are misunderstanding it. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I would say that, and I will also say too. I think that Crab 90, I am defending Stalin, absolutely. To use like the CPC way of looking at Mao, 70-30, 70% good, 30% bad. I think that's a fine way of looking at Stalin as well. 70% good, 30% bad. 70% of the stuff he did was really fucking good. There's a 30% that's bad, and it's important to critique that, analyze it. Again, the book gets into it, but that 70% is just not talked about.
Yeah,
at all. It's never analyzed. And then again, the 30% is projected to be the totality of Stalin. And it's often, to make it the totality, it's fabricated to do that. You see that with Mao, who's my second book I recommend, On Practice and Contradiction.
Slavoj. How do we say that guy's name? Slavoj Zizek?
Yes, Slavoj Zizek.
Slavoj, excuse me.
Verso books, you can find it there. That's another good book, again, to sort of balance Stalin, Mao, sort of two of the five heads of communism. It's important to read their theory. And again, as I state this, primary sources are key. Another view of Stalin goes into the primary sources of all of these propaganda points by the West against the USSR, and it destructs them in very easy to understand ways. And again, there's criticism of Stalin. For anyone that doesn't want to read the book, that's fine. Revolutionary Left Radio has a fantastic video on Stalin. I think it's the most popular video on YouTube, on their YouTube channel, Rev Left Radio. Highly recommend people check out that video. I think he did it with the guys at Proles of the Round Table, which is another podcast. And they go through all of the little checkpoints of like, okay, this is what they say about Stalin, this is what they say about Stalin, and they dissect it completely. And again, to think about it in this way, it's not always the case, because there's examples of like people that the U.S. deems as evil that are truly evil. Hitler, for example.
I didn't like him.
No, not a big fan. There's so many of like the great evils against the U.S. that are just painted like that are completely washed over with, bloodstained red, that really belongs on the U.S. side.
So I gotta jump in. So 30-70, 70-30, that's how like we paint these other nations. How do you think we paint ourselves? It seems, I would say 99, no, well, I don't know. I'm trying to go with the 70-30. Well, I'm just saying we paint ourselves as like 99.9% bad, good, and like 0.1%. Like they didn't even like, they don't even acknowledge the amount of bad that they do. It's like it sort of feels like I don't know. It just feels like bullshit. Like they can't give us the truth. They're so willing to lie to us.
The reality is like all the quote unquote like good things that like Americans have done or whatever has been in spite of the government. It's never been at the behest of our bourgeois government. When we look at like the massive points of class struggle in our history, whether it's, the 1840s to the 1860s, whether it's, the early 20th century, whether it's the mid 20th century, whether it's now, the points that we often look to is like, these are like the true, like there's no way you can just like decipher or destruct it. Like these are the good things about America. It's always in spite of what our government does and the government policies. So it's hard because when you look at, let's say, the CPC and the MPC with China, a lot of the good things that are happening in China is at the directive of the CPC in its coalition of 8 parties. When you look at the USSR, right, a lot of the good things that were done by the USSR was done through the collective leadership of the Politburo, was through the collective leadership of the cadres in the regions. It's you see this in other countries that have different societies than us, that it is much more of a unison between the top and the bottom and trying to make society better. In the U.S., there isn't that unison. There's class collaboration in the U.S., but that's with the white America. We have the aristocracy of race that was created in this, not just aristocracy of economics because of slavery. So you do see some of that class collaboration, but that's not in unity to make society better. It's in unity to oppress and exploit other sections of America. So it's hard to sort of say, like, what is the percentage of America? Because there's definitely, like, great things that Americans have done. You look at, again, the periods of time that I've referenced, the massive waves of class struggle from the 1840s, honestly, maybe even the 1880s, the early 20th century, the civil rights movement, from Occupy onwards, we've honestly seen a massive point of class struggle in the U.S. Those are great things to sort of hold to glorify in a sense, because the class struggle is the key. Our successes and defeats as a society, as a human species, to be honest, falls down to that class struggle. So anytime we succeed in any battle, even though we haven't won the war yet, every battle we win, I hold up. Absolutely. It's hard, though, to say, like, the U.S., is it 70-30, 80-20, 90-10? The U.S. government's just 100% bad. Like, I'm sorry. Like, what one good thing can you say? Because every good thing has been a concession due to the class struggle. When we look at Social Security or unemployment benefits, those are all done because the working man, the working women had to rise up and basically uprising to get those concessions that are constantly rolled back by the government. So it's hard. I think every bourgeois government, especially in the imperial core, I want to preface that, within the imperial core, to try to say that they do good things, I feel like diminishes the horrors that they do, which far outweighs it.
For sure, for sure. All right, so we are nearing the hour mark, and this is when I like to remind my guests that I respect their time. I usually say we chat for about an hour, and at this point, I want to give you an out, and if you want to skedaddle, we can do that. I want to give you an opportunity for sure to remind folks all about the different projects that you're doing and where they could find them doing that. Otherwise, Matthew, this is like a real joy for me. I like talking to folks, especially folks with which, I feel, somewhat relatively ideologically aligned, but also people with which I can learn from. I don't love being the smartest person in the room. It makes me feel like bad because I'm stupid. You know what I mean? I should be among the dumbest. And so with that said, you've been a great guest, and I've really loved chatting with you, and I could feel like we could do this for a long time. So you got your own show, which is sad because I was like, dang it, we got a really good vibe going. We should do something with Matthew. But I do want to let you know that this is a joy for me. The door's pretty much always open for you to come on by and talk about any project that that you're working on, or anything that you just want to talk about. If you just want to vibe or whatever, hang out with me for 30 minutes or an hour. That's cool. I'm just always looking for cool people to talk to and then share the good word, because I'm stupid and you're smart. All right. Anyways, okay. With that said, what else is there that you wanted to make sure that we brought into the conversation today? Is there anything that we've left out? Feel free to let me know.
First off, just want to say I really appreciate you inviting me on. It doesn't happen often for people to invite me on, so when it happens, I always feel like a little bit proud of myself, So I appreciate it. And I love your work. This is actually one of the few Twitch shows that I'll tune into, to be quite honest.
Oh, I'm awesome. Everyone loves me.
Twitch and I'll see people streaming. I'm just like, I'll jump in for like a minute, support. But, usually like you have more of a chill stream. So I'll come in maybe late at night or whatever and catch the old stream, whatever it is. It's always fun. And I will say this, like you prefaced this entire start to the show. Like we both had radicalizing journeys, and I saw yours in a sense, like in real time. I remember seeing like your posts on Twitter 2 years ago versus now, and there's a difference. And It's funny. I've gone back to some of my very old tweets from like 2016, and man, it is rough. I've had to delete some because I'm like, I don't stand by that at all. So like, I have to delete that. So I appreciate it, comrade. I really do. I always love when anytime leftist media members collaborate. We need more of it. There's very few of us comparative to the mainstream, platforms and what content is put on these platforms. Anything to add? I'll just say this. I saw somebody in the comment basically, I think this was kind of a dismissive point to me, was that the guest was just telling people to touch grass. Yes. I'm sorry. When people talk about like theory and practice, which is already telling people to go touch grass, there's a huge misstep there that people don't understand. The in-between part of theory and practice is organization. It's the fact that in order to practice the theory, you have to have collective organization. So I always tell people, get involved in the struggle. I don't care where you are on the spectrum, if you're a progressive, social democrat, which I don't agree with most of the time or all the time. If you're an anarchist, which I don't agree with a lot of time as well, I don't care. Get involved in the struggle. Get involved in an organization. Read theory. Practice that theory. It's going to take all of us, to be quite honest. Like, everyone that's inclined to these ideologies, it is already a small group. So we're already working against the odds. So we need as many people as possible to get involved. And how we're going to win, how we're going to liberate the working class is by getting involved. And I don't, to quote like Vijay Prashad, like, I don't like the struggle. It's not fun. Like, it's hard. It's depressing. Like, this is the worst part of the work in a sense, especially at where we're starting at. But we have a goal. We have a goal of liberation for the working class. Let's get there. Because without theory, organization, and practice, we will not get there. And I'm tired of the struggle. And I know for a fact everyone out there listening is tired of the struggle too. We all are. So get involved. Whatever it is, whether it's DSA, whether it's a mutual aid group in your community, whether it's CPUSA, which I recommend, or PSL, FRSO, it doesn't matter. Get involved, please. It's important to get in leftist media. It's important to listen to people like Dan. It's important to listen to people like me, I guess. Not really. It's not. Yeah, I'm not the smart one.
You.
But get involved. Because I guarantee you, if you're listening right now and you think I'm smart, if you get involved in the struggle, get involved with the organization, you're going to meet people that have decades of experience that can teach you so much more than I could or that Dan could. And there's some real value to that. But yeah, that's basically my finale of what I wanted to say. I appreciate this, Dan. I really do. And vice versa. Anytime you want to come on, I'll throw out a message to you, whatever, and say, hey, you want to jump on? Anytime, man. Don't worry about it.
Let's schedule me in. Yeah, let's fucking do it. All right. Well, this has been a joy, Matthew. I love that last little bit. I'll probably clip that out and share that on the social medias. That was nice and tight, and I just love the way you put that. Really a joy to hang out with you today. It's a pleasure. Again, the door is open. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want to jump on before I reach out to you again. We'll circle back and keep the thing going. This is a good vibe we got going here. All right, Matthew. All right, with that, I'm just going to say thank you again. Peace, solidarity, and we'll see you next time. Love your face. All right.
Bye, comrades.
All right, bye, comrade. Yes. Woo! It's Matthew.